Good morning, everybody. I'm not going to deliver a keynote speech. I'm just going to say a very warm welcome, Pera House, Hoş geldiniz to everybody, for what promises to be, I think, a really interesting event. It's nice to see so many of you here at this quite early start time, but this is a lovely day. So I was just saying this building always looks at its very best on a lovely sunny morning, so hopefully we're going to have some very interesting discussions. Particularly warm welcome to those of you whose first visit to Pera House this is. I'm glad you weren't deterred by the heavy security presence outside the building. That's there because there was an expectation that perhaps there might be some protests following the US, UK and French strikes last weekend against the chemical facilities in Syria, but there haven't been any such protests, and in fact the Turkish government welcomed the strikes. So glad you made it through all that and that you're here, and so big welcome. The UK-Turkey bilateral relationship is based on long history, close trust and talking and long years of partnership, and that's very much manifested in the trade and investment relationship that we have with Turkey. UK-Turkey bilateral trade has been on an upward trajectory, and last year was no exception. We have a plus above £15 billion bilateral trade relationship. We don't have the services data in from last year, but the goods exports alone from the UK to Turkey were up over 25%, and Turkish exports to the UK up about 10%. So it's a bright story on that front. And in most years, the UK is either the second or third largest source of FDI into Turkey. As many of you will know, Vodafone is the largest British investor, but there are more than 2,750 UK companies registered in Turkey, many of the big names that you'll know, HSBC, Rolls-Royce, BP, Mott MacDonald, Diageo, GSK. DIT, the Department for International Trade, we have a 3-person team here in Istanbul which is dedicated to supporting inward investment from Turkey to the UK. And then the Department for International Trade in the UK, mainly in London, has a huge team of people who are there to take forward the work with investors that we identify at this end. And our team here has beaten its targets on inward investment over the last few years quite handsomely. Over 200 Turkish businesses have set up operations in the UK, coming from a whole range of sectors. Major companies such as Yildiz Holdings, who bought United Biscuits back in 2014, Arçelik, Beko, Vestel, Simit, Soraya, a recent one. Substantial presence now in the UK, including on the King's Road, which I came upon the other day, much to my delight. The first Turkish investment bank, Dome, was established in the UK recently. IPOs in London on the London Stock Exchange have become more international too, and in 2017, 9 out of the top 10 IPOs by size came from outside of the UK. The London Stock Exchange's global market for high growth companies, known as AIM, also ended the year on a high, with 49 new companies floating on AIM, raising over £2 billion, which was a huge increase by money compared to 2016 of over 90%. 2 Turkish corporates listed on the LSE recently, Global Ports Holding and DP Eurasia NV, who's the franchisee of Domino's Pizza. I also want to just mention UK export finance. Turkey has been identified as a priority market by UK export finance, becoming one of the first countries to have an in-country representative from our UK Export Credit Agency. Özgür, I'm sure, is here. Özgür Kutay, there he is on the second row. Those of you who haven't met him, you'll have an opportunity later on. This is signifying the importance that the UK places on enhancing trade and investment relationships with Turkey, and Özgür will be helping to increase UK export finance's efforts to boost trade between our two countries. UK EF doubled its capacity to support UK-Turkey trade last year from £1.75 billion up to £3.5 billion. It's also extended local currency offering to include Turkish lira, making it easier for Turkish investors to buy UK products and services with finance in their own currency. And UKEF and Turk Exim Bank have recently signed an agreement to pool their financial support in order to co-finance major infrastructure projects in third countries in collective support of UK and Turkish exports. While the UK's future relationship with the EU still has to be determined, we're not leaving Europe, and that's the mantra. We are leaving the EU, but we are definitely not leaving Europe. Britain will remain a close friend and ally and trading partner with our European neighbours who are so important to us. And the UK remains absolutely committed to pursuing free trade. Anyone who has heard our Trade Minister, Liam Fox, speak ever will know that he is an absolute passionate advocate of free trade. The UK remains committed to it, and that includes seeking to achieve continuity in our trade and investment relationships with third countries, including those covered by EU free trade agreements or other preferential agreements and arrangements. And we're working closely with our Turkish partners to ensure that we can have as close to continuity of the current trading relationship as possible as we leave the EU. The UK is widely acknowledged as having one of the world's most business-friendly economies. The UK remains the easiest place in Europe to establish and run a business. We're already the #1 destination in Europe for inward investment, and it's clear that and you're going to hear more about that today, we're a great destination. We have an open, liberal economy, flexible, dynamic labour market, great universities, business-friendly tax arrangements, and I could go on. And I'm very much looking forward to today's event. Welcome, Humphry and the guys from Deloitte. Very good to have you here. And with the Chamber as well, it's a great example of how we're all working together to try to encourage you guys to look more closely at the UK for your future investments. So with that, I think I'm handing off to Chris Gaunt from the British Chamber. So I hope we're all going to have an extremely useful time, and I look forward to chatting to some of you over lunch. Thank you very much.
Again, welcome to everybody. It's good to see a good number of people here, and as Judith's already mentioned, we've got the best of the best in the room today, with DIT, the Chamber, of course, our supporters, Denton's and Tarabya British School. We've all come together with Denton's partners here in Turkey. So we do have a wonderful group here which is going to be educating you as to how to go public in UK, which I'm sure will be a very interesting morning session. BCCT, for those that are not aware, and if you look at our logo up there, it's got 1887 on it. We've been here now for 131 years. I opened the door in no, I didn't. But I may look as if I did. Sometimes I feel as if I did. We've been here a long time, and I think it's another indication, as Judith mentioned, about the long-standing history that UK has had with Turkey in doing business, and also being a regional supporter over the many issues and conflicts that Turkey's had to face in the past. We've not always been on the same side, but when it comes to business, I think business is still supreme, and Turkey is still a priority market for UK, and I think that will long continue into the future. We are a strategic partner with DIT. We deliver their B2B services to SMEs and the larger mid-sized companies back in UK. We have a team of 8 people in our Sousa Plaza office, which are all welcome to visit whenever you've got the time. We provide a vast range of services to UK companies, and we also support the inward investment team that Zeynep's heading, because we've got a lot of our members who sort of knock on our door and ask, how do we start the process of investing and locating in UK? With Deloitte, they've become our strategic partner. As I say, we are with the best of the best here, and we look forward to working with Deloitte going forward. I think we're in for some interesting times, particularly over the short term, to see just where Turkey is heading. But we're still optimistic. I mean, we believe that the long-term future of Turkey is very positive. And Turkey is a long-term bet. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think it's always been like that. And as long as you've got the commitment for Turkey, Turkey will give you a good return, and that's what we support. When it comes to IPOs, who's gone through an IPO? Hands up, 1, 2, 3. Oh, well, we've both been through an IPO. Yeah, for those that have gone through an IPO, it's an interesting experience. And at the end of the day, it's a marketing exercise, and it's about making big bets. And it's interesting when you do the road shows and you talk to the investor community. What questions they're asking. I mean, they're not really asking anything about what you're doing today. What they want to know is about what you're doing tomorrow, and what the future of the organisation is. And one thing that, having gone through an IPO myself with CCI, my previous day job was with Coca-Cola, you've got to get the right messages across. And sometimes you get carried away with your own propaganda. And it takes organisations like Deloitte to keep your feet on the ground to make sure that you're actually addressing the right issues. Because in the best of the world, when you're working for an organisation that's very heavily marketing-led, you tend to take that marketing philosophy through and tend to forget some of the more interesting detail when it comes to the financial implications, what your shareholders are looking for, and also what the management team are capable of achieving. So we're going to hear a lot about that today, and just how that works. The best place to do that is still London, and you've got access to world-leading institutions who are providing both consultancy services, financial services, and that's the address that you need when you're looking to achieve a big interest in your IPO. So again, we're going to learn how's the best way to approach that. London still has the best reputation. Judith highlighted all the support that's available there. What we can do in terms of BCCT, we're more a facilitator in terms of supporting our strategic partners like Deloitte in order to make sure that we get a good attendance, and we use our networks effectively to get support for this type of seminar. So I'm not going to say any more. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Humphry, who will take you through the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. For your kind words, and we're obviously delighted to be holding this with the British Chamber of Commerce Turkey, and also thank you to Her Majesty's Consul General Judith Slater. Delighted to be able to hold it in the magnificent Pera House, of course. I was asked to say just a few words about Deloitte, and you'll see here it says Deloitte Private, and just a brief introduction to what this means. As many people know, in Turkey probably know Deloitte mainly as an audit firm and a tax firm, which is the basis of, I guess, our history. We are now the biggest professional services firm in the world, but what people probably don't realize is we're actually by far the biggest consulting and advisory firm in the world. That is really internationally where we have grown. And so we're very keen, I'm keen while I'm here, as CEO of Deloitte Turkey, to ensure that we connect all those advisory skills that are available around the world into the Turkish market with our Turkish clients, and to support our Turkish clients wherever they operate in the world. To me, that is critically important, and I think it's very important not only for those Turkish businesses, but for the Turkish economy, as many of the businesses start internationalizing and globalizing. So, for example, we have an IPO team here, which has worked with on a number of pending IPO applications currently, both with the London Stock Exchange, but also overseas in other countries. So there is an appetite, clearly, among the Turkish corporate community to look for listings abroad. And those listings may sometimes be dual listings. When we were holding this seminar, interestingly, one or two people said, well, perhaps this might be badly perceived, this seminar, like, money is going to go out of Turkey, and this is not very good for the country. Well, it's actually quite the opposite, because the whole purpose of a foreign listing is to access foreign capital to help build the business. And you can access foreign capital markets. It doesn't mean that you're taking your money out. It may be you're just trying to tap a wider investment base to build your business in Turkey. But it may be because you actually want to expand overseas and you want more recognition, you want access to the stability and reputation of a strong overseas market, while retaining the ability to attract capital at the Istanbul Borsa, for example. And we see a number of companies which have dual listings for that very reason. Deloitte Private, because we're very, very large as a business, people, I think, sometimes think we must only be interested in serving, S&P 500 companies or big governments or banking sector, etc. But the truth is, in many of our markets, the private company sector is the most valuable to us. Turkey is such a market. So over 55% of our business here in Turkey, we have just over 1,300 people here in Turkey. So we're quite a large business, but over 55% of that is for private businesses. And obviously a lot of those private businesses have a dominant family shareholding. So it's an incredibly important part of the sector for us. It is the most important sector for us here in Turkey. And dealing with private companies is very different from dealing with public companies. They work in a different way, they have a different governance structure, but they also have a different kind of rhythm to the way they work. Sometimes private companies can have better long-scale investment horizons because they're not worried about short-term quarterly results, and some of the variations that sometimes stock markets can provide. Although, of course, I'm not trying to say it's not good going public. It can be very good for businesses going public. But sometimes a mixture of a family business with a floating a certain share, a proportion of the business, 25%, 30%, can be a very good combination. And we're seeing, obviously, a lot of interest in the market here in that kind of flotation. So private businesses are very important to us. Definitely, in the life of a private business, going public or a decision to float shares is probably the most important thing that ever happens. I mean, I think the only thing that's comparable for a firm in its history is when it does a large piece of M&A, let's say it acquires a business of similar size and suddenly doubles in scale, which is obviously a big event. But going public is a very big event, partly because often to be able to go public, especially in some very well-regulated markets, there is quite a lot of preparation needed, and we're going to hear more about that later. But I say going public is the equivalent, I guess, for a person of like getting married. It's a major event in your lifetime, and suddenly you have a new set of stakeholders, which could be your in-laws. And they will invest in you and help you, but at the same time they expect some sort of dividend, which I don't want to take the analogy too far and say your children are the dividend. But it is like that. Suddenly you do have a new community in your business, and it's important to learn to deal with that community. So going private is very important, and getting the right skills and advice about when you go private, when you go public, which market, how much you float, all those kind of things is critical, and you need impartial advice around that. That's very important. So the advantages, not only, I would say, access to capital, but also the stability of an international investor base. And the thing about the London Stock Exchange is, I'm not here to plug the London Stock Exchange particularly. I'm here wearing my Deloitte CEO hat rather than my Deloitte I'm British hat. But it is the most international of the markets. I mean, New York Stock Exchange is obviously the biggest stock market in the world, and NASDAQ is big, but they are very American markets. They're 90% US. And the London Stock Exchange is something like, if you look at the investor base, it's something like 50% UK, 50% international. So you get a very broad international shareholder base. And that's one of the reasons I think it is so popular for international investors. So foreign listings of something like a third of the London Stock Exchange. And so they're used to dealing with foreign companies listing there. And I think that's important that is understood. And of course, I think a listing also brings with it some eminence, because the market is regulated and appropriately regulated. You don't want regulation that is too expensive and too burdensome. And I think that's another attraction of the London market. It's got a good reputation without being too onerous. So you get access to cheap capital, which is after all what it's about, without losing that quality. And of course that quality and brand and status goes all the way through accessing new markets, new suppliers and customers, etc. around the world. I think Turkey, I was only at an event last night speaking to two C-suite executives from major Turkish businesses which are world-class in their own area. Some doing one producing a very specialized intermediate good which is required around the world, where this company has absolutely the number one reputation, and another very, very big business where the Turkey produces is the number third biggest producer in the world. These are phenomenally powerful businesses. But I think the story I say to all these companies is, if you are going to stay in that position as a world leader, increasingly what we're seeing is big companies are going to need to invest more in technology. You're seeing large companies worried about disruption merging with each other as a protection against disruption, because big scale can be a protection. Or they're looking to go public, or to merge with technology companies, for example. We're seeing a lot of this in the market now. So I think for Turkey to maintain its phenomenal reputation in the world, is particularly around very high quality production, we're going to see more of a demand for accessing those bigger capital markets in the future. So with that, it seems a very good time to be holding this event. I'm delighted that we're able to hold it. And it's now time to hand over to who? I haven't been told. Okay, thanks very much.